The patrol car's red and blue lights sliced through the twilight, pinning Riley Voss to the cracked sidewalk like a spotlight on a stage she never auditioned for. She stood frozen, her black hoodie clinging to her frame, her girlfriend Mia's hand slipping from hers as the officers stepped out, their faces hard as the asphalt beneath them. Riley's pulse thundered, not from fear, but from the secret she carried, a badge tucked against her chest, one that could turn this moment upside down. Riley Voss, 28, was no stranger to scrutiny. Growing up in the small town of Ashwood, Pennsylvania, she'd learned early that her short-cropped hair, leather jackets, and unapologetic love for women painted a target on her back. But she wasn't just the troublemaker the locals whispered about. By day, she was Special Agent Voss, FBI, working undercover to dismantle a trafficking ring snaking through the Northeast. By night, she was just Riley, the woman who'd found home in Mia Harper's quiet smile. Mia, 27, stood a step behind her now, her blonde hair catching the fading sun. She was a nurse, soft-spoken but fierce, the kind of person who could stitch up a wound or a broken heart with equal care. They'd met 2 years ago at a local diner, where Riley's bad coffee order had sparked a conversation that stretched into dawn. Now, their lives were intertwined, a delicate dance of stolen moments in a town that didn't always look kindly on their love. The officers, 2 men mid-30s, with buzz cuts and egos sharper than their badges, approached with hands on their holsters. "You in the hoodie," the taller one barked, his voice dripping with disdain. "Step away from her. Now." Riley's jaw tightened. She knew the script. She'd heard it in high school, when kids taunted her for kissing her first girlfriend behind the bleachers. She'd heard it in bars, where drunk men thought her love was their entertainment. But this wasn't a schoolyard or a dive bar. This was her street, her life, and she was done playing small. "Officer," she said, her voice steady but laced with steel, "we're just walking home." Her hand stayed near her pocket, where her FBI badge waited like a hidden ace. She didn't want to play it yet. Not here, not like this. But the taller officer, whose nameplate read Carson, stepped closer, his eyes narrowing at her hoodie, her stance, her very existence. "Walking home, huh?" Carson sneered. "You look like trouble. Hands where I can see them." His partner, a stocky man named Daniels, flanked Mia, who stood rigid, her hazel eyes darting between Riley and the officers. The air crackled with tension, the kind that could ignite with a single wrong move. Riley raised her hands slowly, her mind racing. She'd spent years training for moments like this, not as a victim, but as the one in control. Her FBI work had taken her into drug dens and cartel hideouts, places where a wrong glance could end in blood. Yet here, in her own town, she was being profiled for a hoodie and the woman she loved. The irony burned. "Riley, don't," Mia whispered, her voice trembling but firm. She knew Riley's temper, the fire that flared when she was pushed too far. But Riley also knew Mia's fear, not of the officers, but of losing her. They'd built something fragile and beautiful in a world that often felt like it wanted to tear them apart. "ID," Carson demanded, his hand still hovering near his gun. Riley's eyes flicked to his, reading him like a case file. Insecure, itching for power, the kind of cop who saw difference as a threat. She reached for her wallet, moving deliberately, her fingers brushing the badge she wasn't ready to reveal. Not yet. She wanted to see how far this would go. Daniels, meanwhile, turned to Mia. "You okay, miss? You don't have to stay with her." His tone was softer, but it carried the same poison, assumption that Mia needed saving, that Riley was the danger. Mia's face hardened, her voice cutting through the dusk. "I'm fine," she said, stepping closer to Riley. "She's my girlfriend. We're not doing anything wrong." The word girlfriend landed like a gauntlet, and Riley felt a surge of pride despite the tightening knot in her chest. Mia wasn't backing down, and neither would she. Carson's lip curled. "Girlfriend, huh? Figures." He gestured to Riley's hoodie. What's under there? You hiding something? His tone was accusatory, as if her clothes, her love, her very being were crimes. Riley's fingers twitched, itching to pull her badge and end this charade, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the weight of every stare she'd endured growing up. Maybe it was the need to protect Mia from whatever came next. I'm not hiding anything, Riley said, her voice low, dangerous. But you're making a mistake. The words hung in the air, a warning Carson didn't heed. He stepped closer, his hand now on his gun, and Riley knew this was about to escalate. The street was quiet, save for the hum of the patrol car's engine and the distant bark of a dog. Neighbors peeked through curtains, their silhouettes ghostly in the windows. Ashwood wasn't a place where things happened. It was a place where things simmered, where prejudice hid behind polite smiles and church pews. Riley had left for the FBI to escape this town, but it had a way of pulling her back. Turn around, Carson ordered. Hands on the wall. Riley's heart pounded, not for herself, but for Mia, who looked ready to step between them. She caught Mia's eye, shaking her head slightly. Not yet, her gaze said. Let me handle this. As Riley turned, her mind sharpened. She'd faced worse than Carson. Cartel lieutenants, corrupt officials, men who thought power came from a gun. But this was personal. This was her home, her love, her life. And as Carson's hand reached for her shoulder, she made a choice. The badge would stay hidden for now. She'd let them dig their own grave. Because Riley Voss wasn't just a woman in a hoodie. She was a storm, and Ashwood was about to feel it. Riley's hands pressed against the rough brick wall, the cold biting into her palms as Carson's voice grated behind her. Spread your legs, he said, his tone smug, as if he'd already won. She complied, but her mind was a blade, slicing through every detail, his uneven breathing, Daniel's nervous shuffle, Mia's stifled gasp. She could feel Mia's eyes on her, a tether keeping her grounded. Riley wanted to turn, to tell her it would be okay, but she couldn't risk escalating this, not yet. Her FBI training screamed to take control, to flash her badge and shut this down, but something deeper held her back. This wasn't just about her. It was about every kid in Ashwood who'd ever been stopped for looking wrong, every couple who'd hidden their love to avoid a scene like this. Carson patted her down, his hands rougher than necessary, lingering on her hoodie's pockets. What's this? He muttered, pulling out her wallet. He flipped it open, expecting a driver's license, but his fingers froze when they brushed the edge of her badge. Riley's heart skipped. She hadn't meant for him to find it this way. What the hell? Carson's voice dropped, uncertain. He pulled out the badge, its FBI seal glinting under the streetlight. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes widening. Is this real? He stammered, looking from the badge to Riley, who turned slowly, her expression unreadable. It's real, she said, her voice calm but carrying an edge that cut through the night. Special Agent Riley Voss, FBI. You want to keep going with this, Officer Carson? The words landed like a punch, and for a moment, silence swallowed the street. Carson's face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and defiance. You think you can just pull this out and scare us? He snapped, but his voice wavered. He wasn't used to being outranked, especially not by someone he'd pegged as a nobody. Daniels, smarter or maybe just more cautious, took a step back, his hand dropping from his holster. Mia's eyes locked on Riley, a flicker of pride breaking through her fear. She'd known Riley was an agent, but seeing her wield that authority was something else, a reminder of the woman who'd walked into danger and come out stronger. But Riley didn't feel strong right now. She felt exposed, like a wound-laid bear. Put it away, Carson said, shoving the badge back at her. Doesn't change what you are. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they echoed the hate she'd fought her whole life. Riley tucked the badge into her pocket, her movements deliberate, her eyes never leaving Carson's. What I am, she said, stepping closer, is someone who's done more for this country in a week than you'll do in your career. Now back off. Her voice was low, controlled, but it carried the weight of years spent proving herself, to her family, to Ashwood, to the world. Daniels tugged at Carson's arm. Let's go, man. This isn't worth it. But Carson wasn't ready to let go. He leaned in, his breath hot with anger. You think you're untouchable because of that badge? This town doesn't care who you work for. You're still. Enough, Mia cut in, her voice sharp enough to startle them all. She stepped forward, placing herself between Riley and Carson. You've made your point. Leave us alone. Her hands trembled, but her stance was unyielding, a nurse's calm under pressure mixed with a lover's fire. Carson hesitated, his bravado cracking under the weight of Riley's badge and Mia's defiance. The street felt smaller now, the neighbors' curtains twitching as the scene unfolded. Riley's mind raced, calculating her next move. She could escalate this, call in her supervisor, have Carson and Daniels disciplined, but that wouldn't fix Ashwood. It wouldn't change the looks she and Mia got at the grocery store or the whispers at church. Instead, she took Mia's hand, her fingers warm and steady. Let's go, she said softly, pulling Mia away from the officers. Carson muttered something under his breath, but he didn't follow. The patrol car's lights still flashed, a silent warning, but Riley didn't look back. They walked in silence for a block, the weight of the encounter settling like dust. Mia's grip tightened, and Riley felt the question before it came. Why didn't you show them the badge sooner? Mia asked, her voice quiet but searching. Riley stopped under a street lamp, its glow casting shadows across her face. Because I shouldn't have to, she said, her voice raw. I shouldn't need a badge to walk down the street with you. To love you. The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Mia's eyes softened, and she reached up, brushing a strand of hair from Riley's forehead. You're right, Mia said. But I'm glad you have it. She smiled, a small, fierce thing that made Riley's chest ache. They stood there, two women against the world, their love a quiet rebellion in a town that didn't always understand. As they continued home, Riley's mind drifted to her work. The trafficking ring she was investigating had ties to Ashwood, a fact she'd kept from Mia to protect her. But tonight's run-in with Carson and Daniels wasn't random. Her gut told her they were connected. Small-town cops didn't harass with that kind of precision unless someone was pulling strings. Back at their apartment, a modest one-bedroom with mismatched furniture and a view of the town's water tower, Riley locked the door and pulled Mia close. I'm sorry, she whispered, her lips brushing Mia's temple. I didn't want you to see that. Mia pulled back, her eyes fierce. Don't apologize. I chose you, Riley. All of you, the agent, the rebel, the woman who wears hoodies to piss off people like Carson. She laughed, a sound that broke the tension, and Riley couldn't help but smile. But as they settled into bed, Riley's mind wouldn't rest. Carson's words echoed, not because they hurt, but because they were a symptom of something bigger. The trafficking ring, the cops, the town's undercurrent of hate, it was all connected. And Riley Voss, FBI agent or not, was about to tear it apart. The next morning, Riley woke to the scent of coffee and the soft clatter of Mia in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the apartment's thin curtains, painting the room in hues of gold and regret. Last night's encounter lingered like a bruise, but Riley pushed it down, focusing on the case that had brought her back to Ashwood. She sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open to a classified FBI database. The trafficking ring was sophisticated, moving women and drugs through small towns like Ashwood to avoid big city scrutiny. Riley's undercover work had her posing as a drifter, blending into the town's shadows to track leads. Her hoodie, her attitude, it was all part of the cover. But last night had blown a hole in that disguise. Mia set a mug in front of her, her fingers brushing Riley's. You okay? She asked, her voice gentle but probing. Riley nodded, but her eyes stayed on the screen. She couldn't tell Mia everything. Not about the late-night stakeouts, the coded messages, the names of men who'd killed to keep their secrets. Mia deserved a life free of that darkness. "I'm fine," Riley said, forcing a smile. "Just work stuff." Mia raised an eyebrow, unconvinced, but she didn't push. Instead, she sat across from Riley, sipping her coffee, her presence a quiet anchor. Riley's phone buzzed, a text from her handler, Agent Torres. "Meet at the diner. Noon. Got a lead." She pocketed the phone, her mind already mapping the day. The diner was neutral ground, a place where she could blend in, but it was also where she'd first met Mia. The memory tugged at her, a reminder of what she was fighting for. At the diner, Torres was waiting in a corner booth, his gray suit out of place among the locals in flannel and jeans. He was in his 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that had earned Riley's respect. "Voss," he greeted, sliding a folder across the table. "We've got a name. Victor Hale." Riley's stomach tightened. Hale was a local businessman, owner of a trucking company that operated out of Ashwood. His name had surfaced in her intel before, but never with enough evidence to act. "What's new?" she asked, flipping open the folder. "Intercepted a call," Torres said. "Hale's moving a shipment tonight. Women, not drugs. Warehouse on Route 12. He leaned closer, his voice low. "And he's got friends in the department. Watch your back." Riley's thoughts flashed to Carson and Daniels. Friends in the department. It made sense. Their aggression last night wasn't just prejudice. It was a warning. Someone knew she was closing in. "I'll handle it," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. Torres studied her. "You sure?"
"You're too close to this town, Voss."
"Don't let it cloud you." He didn't know about Mia, about the life Riley was building here, but his words hit home. Ashwood wasn't just a case, it was personal. Back at the apartment, Riley geared up. Her Glock, her badge, a burner phone. She moved with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times. Mia was at the hospital, working a double shift, and Riley was grateful for the space. She couldn't face those hazel eyes and lie about where she was going. The warehouse on Route 12 was a hulking shadow against the night sky, its rusted walls hiding secrets Riley was determined to expose. She parked her unmarked car a half-mile away, moving through the woods with the silence of a ghost. Her hoodie blended into the darkness, her breath steady as she scanned the perimeter. Voices carried from inside, low, urgent male. Riley crouched behind a stack of crates, her hand on her gun. Through a cracked window, she saw Hale, his broad frame unmistakable, barking orders to 2 men. One of them was Carson. Her blood ran cold. Carson wasn't just a bigoted cop. He was in deep, part of the machine she was trying to dismantle. She pulled out her burner phone, recording the scene, her heart pounding as Hale gestured to a group of women huddled in the corner. They were young, terrified, their faces pale under the fluorescent lights. Riley's training kicked in. She needed evidence, not heroics. She snapped photos, her camera's soft clicks drowned out by the hum of a generator. But then she heard it, a muffled cry from one of the women. Her resolve cracked. She couldn't wait for backup, not when lives were on the line. She slipped inside, sticking to the shadows, her gun drawn. The air was thick with the smell of oil and fear. Hale's voice boomed, oblivious to her presence. "Move them out before dawn," he said. "No mistakes." Riley's mind raced. She could take them down now, but it was 3 against 1, and she didn't know how many others were nearby. Her badge felt heavy in her pocket, a reminder of the line between agent and vigilante. But then she saw Carson grab one of the women, his grip cruel, and something in her snapped. "FBI," she shouted, stepping into the light, her gun trained on Hale. "Hands up now." The room froze, all eyes on her. Carson's face twisted in recognition, his hand reaching for his weapon. Riley didn't hesitate. She fired a warning shot, the sound echoing like thunder. "Drop it," she ordered, her voice a blade. Carson complied, his gun clattering to the floor. Hale raised his hands, his smirk infuriatingly calm. "You're out of your depth, Agent," he said. "This town's mine." "Not anymore," Riley shot back. She radioed for backup, her eyes never leaving Hale. The women in the corner watched her, hope flickering in their eyes. Riley's heart ached. They reminded her of Mia, of herself, of every person who'd ever felt powerless. As sirens wailed in the distance, Riley knew this was only the beginning. Hale's operation was bigger than Ashwood, and Carson's involvement meant the rot went deep. But for now, she'd won this battle. She just hoped she could keep Mia safe from the war. The warehouse raid was a blur of flashing lights and shouted commands as FBI agents swarmed the scene. Riley stood firm, her gun still trained on Hale as her colleagues cuffed him and Carson. The women were escorted to safety, their eyes haunted but grateful. Riley's chest tightened with relief, but the weight of what came next pressed harder. Back at the field office, a converted warehouse an hour from Ashwood, Riley debriefed with Torres. The room was stark, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the concrete walls. "Good work, Voss," Torres said, his tone clipped but approving. "But this is bigger than Hale. He's a middleman. We need the top." Riley nodded, her mind already piecing together the puzzle. Hale's trucking company was a front, moving victims across state lines, but the real power lay higher, someone with enough influence to keep local cops like Carson in line. She handed over her photos and recordings, her hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her. "You're staying under," Torres said, not a question. "Ashwood's hot now. They'll know someone's sniffing around." He paused, studying her. "You sure you can handle it?" "I was born for this," Riley said, her voice firm. But as she drove back to Ashwood, doubt crept in. Not about the case, but about Mia. Keeping her in the dark was getting harder, and last night's encounter with Carson had already shaken their fragile peace. Mia was waiting when Riley got home, her face pale under the kitchen light. "You didn't tell me you were working tonight," she said, her voice tight. "I saw the news. A raid on Route 12. That was you, wasn't it?" Riley hesitated, caught between duty and love. "Mia, she stopped, running a hand through her hair. "I couldn't tell you. It's not safe." "Not safe." Mia's voice rose, her eyes flashing. "Riley, I'm not some fragile thing you need to protect. I'm in this with you. Those cops last night, they weren't random. They targeted us. And now you're out there, risking your life, and you won't even let me in?" Riley's throat tightened. She crossed the room, taking Mia's hands. "I'm trying to keep you safe," she said, her voice raw. "This case, it's ugly. People like Hale, they don't care who gets hurt. I can't lose you." Mia pulled her hands away, her expression torn. "You're not losing me, Riley. But you're pushing me away. I deserve to know what's going on." She paused, her voice softening. "I love you. All of you. Even the parts you think you have to hide." The words hit Riley like a wave, washing away her defenses. She pulled Mia into her arms, holding her tight, the scent of her lavender shampoo grounding her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll tell you what I can. Just trust me." Mia nodded, her face buried in Riley's shoulder. They stood like that for a long time, the world outside their apartment fading away. But Riley's mind was already back on the case. Carson's arrest would rattle the network, and whoever was above Hale would be watching. The next day, Riley dug deeper. She met with a contact, a bartender named Jake, who tipped her off about Hale's trucks. They met in a dive bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where secrets were currency. Jake slid her a napkin with a name scrawled on it, Margaret Klein. "She's a councilwoman," Jake said, his voice low. "Big money, big influence. Word is, she's bankrolling Hale's operation." Riley's pulse quickened. Klein was a pillar of Ashwood, a church-going widow who'd built a reputation on charity and charm. If she was dirty, it explained why the town's cops turned a blind eye. Riley spent the next few days tailing Klein, blending into Ashwood's rhythm. She wore her hoodie, her cover as a drifter still intact, but the weight of her badge felt heavier with every step. Klein's life looked clean: fundraisers, church meetings, lunches at the country club. But Riley noticed the men who lingered at her events, their eyes too sharp for civilians. One night, Riley followed Klein to a secluded estate outside town. Hidden in the trees, she watched as a black SUV pulled up and a man stepped out. He was older, maybe 50, with a military bearing and a face she recognized from her database: Richard Voss. Her father. Her heart stopped. Richard had been a distant figure her whole life, a retired cop who'd never accepted her sexuality, her career, her choices. They hadn't spoken in years, not since she'd left Ashwood for the FBI. Seeing him here, with Klein, wasn't a coincidence. Riley's hands shook as she snapped photos, her mind reeling. Was her father involved? Or was he a pawn like Carson? She needed answers, but confronting him would blow her cover. She drove back to the apartment, her thoughts a tangle of betrayal and duty. Mia was asleep when Riley slipped into bed, her warmth a lifeline. But as Riley stared at the ceiling, she knew the case was closing in, not just on Hale's network, but on her past. Her father's face haunted her, a reminder that Ashwood's shadows ran deeper than she'd ever imagined. Riley's world felt like it was fracturing, each piece sharper than the last. Her father's presence at Klein's estate wasn't just a lead, it was a wound, reopening scars she'd buried years ago. She spent the next morning poring over her files, cross-referencing Richard Voss's name with every report, every whisper of corruption in Ashwood. The evidence was thin but damning. Richard had been a cop for 30 years, retiring just as Hale's trucking company started expanding. Phone records showed calls between him and Klein, late-night meetings that didn't make the town's social pages. Riley's gut churned. She wanted to believe he was undercover, like her, but the man she'd known didn't play those games. He played power. She couldn't tell Mia, not yet. Their fight about secrets still lingered, and this was too raw, too personal. Instead, Riley threw herself into the case, tailing Klein's associates and mapping the network. She met Torres at a gas station outside town, handing over her latest findings. Richard Voss. Torres's brow furrowed. Your father, right? You didn't mention he was in play. Didn't know, Riley said, her voice tight. He's not my family anymore. The words felt like a lie, but she pushed through. If he's with Klein, he's either complicit or clueless. Either way, I need to know. Torres nodded, his expression grim. We're close, boss. Klein's meeting someone big tomorrow night, hotel downtown. Get in, get eyes on it. But keep it clean. No personal vendettas. Riley agreed, but as she drove back to Ashwood, her father's face haunted her. She remembered his disapproval, his cold silence, when she came out at 17. You're throwing your life away, he'd said, his voice like gravel. She'd left for the FBI to prove him wrong, but now their paths were colliding in the worst way. That night, Mia noticed the tension in Riley's shoulders, the way her eyes darted to her phone. Talk to me, Mia said, setting down her book. They were curled up on the couch, a rare moment of quiet. You're carrying something heavy. I can see it. Riley hesitated, then let it spill. Not the case details, but the truth about her father. I saw him, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. With someone I'm investigating. I don't know if he's part of it, but it's him, Mia. My dad. Mia's eyes softened, and she pulled Riley close. You don't have to face him alone, she said. Whatever he's done, you're not him. You're better. Her words were a balm, but they couldn't erase the dread pooling in Riley's chest. The next night, Riley slipped into the hotel, her hoodie traded for a blazer to blend with the crowd. The ballroom was packed, Klein's charity gala a glittering facade for whatever deal was going down. Riley spotted her father across the room, his gray hair catching the chandelier light. He was talking to a man she didn't recognize, their body language tense. She moved closer, her earpiece feeding her Torres's updates from the surveillance van outside. "Klein's in the VIP suite," he said. "Get up there, Voss." Riley nodded to herself, slipping through the crowd, her heart pounding as she passed her father. He didn't see her, or if he did, he didn't care. The VIP suite was guarded, but Riley's badge and a quick lie about a security sweep got her through. Inside, Klein sat with a man in a tailored suit, his accent Eastern European. They were discussing routes, payments, dates, details that confirmed Klein's role in the trafficking ring. Riley recorded every word, her phone hidden in her sleeve. But then the door opened, and Richard Voss walked in. Riley froze, her cover intact but her emotions in chaos. He didn't see her in the shadows, but his presence changed everything. Klein greeted him warmly, too warmly, and Riley's worst fears solidified. Her father wasn't a pawn, he was a player. She slipped out before he spotted her, her mind racing. Back in the van, she handed the recording to Torres. "It's enough to move on, Klein," she said, her voice hollow. "And my father." Torres didn't push, but his eyes held sympathy. "You did good, Voss. We'll take it from here." But Riley knew it wasn't over. Confronting her father wasn't just about the case. It was about her past, her pain, her identity. When she got home, Mia was waiting, her face a mix of worry and love. Riley didn't hide this time. She told Mia about the gala, the recording, her father's betrayal. Mia listened, her hand steady on Riley's, and when the words ran dry, she pulled Riley into a kiss, fierce and grounding. "You're not alone," Mia whispered. "We'll face this together." And for the first time, Riley believed it. But as she held Mia, her mind was already planning the next move. Klein and her father were going down, but the cost would be steep, and Riley wasn't sure she was ready to pay it. The FBI moved fast. Klein's arrest was headline news by morning, her polished image shattered as agents led her from her mansion in cuffs. Riley watched the coverage from the field office, her stomach churning. Her father hadn't been arrested yet. The evidence against him was circumstantial, and Torres wanted more before making a move. Riley's cover was still intact, but Ashwood felt like a minefield. Every glance from a neighbor, every patrol car that passed, carried a new weight. She'd exposed Klein, but the network was still active, and her father's role gnawed at her. Was he a mastermind or a pawn? She needed answers, not just for the case, but for herself. She met Jake at the bar again, his face grim as he slid her a USB drive. "Found this in Hale's office," he said. "Financials, coded names. Your dad's in there." Riley's heart sank as she pocketed the drive. She thanked Jake, her mind already racing to decode the files. Back at the apartment, she and Mia sat at the kitchen table, the USB drive between them. Riley hadn't wanted to involve Mia, but her insistence had won out. "We're a team," Mia had said, her voice firm. Now they pored over the files, decrypting names and transactions. Richard Voss's name appeared too often, linked to offshore accounts and shipments that matched the trafficking routes. "It's him," Riley said, her voice breaking. "He's not just involved, he's deep in it." Mia reached for her hand, but Riley pulled away, the weight of betrayal too heavy. She'd spent years running from her father's judgment, only to find he was worse than she'd ever imagined. "I need to confront him," Riley said, standing. Mia's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. "Be careful," she said, her voice soft but fierce. "You're not just an agent, Riley. You're his daughter." The words followed Riley as she drove to her father's house, a brick colonial on the edge of Ashwood. It was the home she'd grown up in, now a stranger's territory. She knocked, her badge in one hand, her gun holstered but ready. Richard answered, his face hardening when he saw her. "Riley," he said, his voice cold. "What do you want?" "Answers," she said, stepping inside without invitation. The living room smelled of whiskey and old leather, a time capsule of her childhood. "You're working with Klein. With Hale. Trafficking women. Tell me I'm wrong. Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. You don't understand, he said. This town, it's dying. Klein offered a way to keep it alive. Jobs, money. By selling people? Riley's voice shook with rage. You were a cop. You were supposed to protect them.
I protected you, he snapped.
I gave you a life. And you threw it away for what? This. He gestured to her, his disgust clear. You think you're better than me because you've got a badge? You're still a disappointment. The words cut deeper than Riley expected, but she didn't flinch. I'm not the one betraying everything I swore to uphold, she said. You're done, Dad. The FBI's coming for you. Richard's eyes darkened, and for a moment, she thought he might lunge. But he just laughed, a bitter sound. You think you can take me down? You're in over your head, Riley. She left without another word, her hands shaking as she drove away. Back at the apartment, Mia was waiting, her arms open. Riley fell into them, the tears she'd held back for years finally spilling. He's not the man I thought he was, she whispered. He's not you, Mia said, her voice fierce. You're breaking this cycle, Riley. For those women, for us. They held each other, the USB drives, secrets, a heavy promise between them. The next day, Riley handed the drive to Torres. It's enough, she said. Richard Voss is a key player. Move on him. Torres nodded, but his eyes held a warning. This'll get messy, Voss. You ready for that? She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. The case was closing in, and so was the truth about her family. As she left the field office, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Back off or she pays. A photo followed, Mia, leaving the hospital, unaware of the camera. Riley's blood ran cold. The network wasn't just watching her, they were targeting Mia. She sped home, her heart pounding, knowing the fight was no longer just about justice. It was about the woman she loved. Riley burst into the apartment, her heart racing as she called out for Mia. The lights were on, the TV playing softly, but Mia was there, safe, curled up on the couch with a book. Relief flooded Riley, but the photo on her phone burned in her mind. We need to talk, she said, her voice urgent. Mia's face paled as Riley showed her the text. They're watching me? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Riley nodded, pulling her close. I won't let them touch you, she said, her voice fierce. But you need to stay somewhere safe until this is over. Mia shook her head. I'm not running, Riley. This is our fight. Her stubbornness was infuriating and beautiful, but Riley couldn't risk her. They agreed Mia would stay with a friend in the next town, someone unconnected to the case. Riley drove her there, the silence between them heavy with unspoken fears. Back at the field office, Riley laid out the threat to Torres. They know I'm close, she said. This is retaliation. Torres's face was grim. We're moving on Richard Voss tonight, he said. We've got enough from the USB drive to tie him to Klein and the network. You're sitting this one out, Voss. Too personal. Riley wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Her father's betrayal was a wound she couldn't ignore, and her focus was split between the case and Mia's safety. She handed over her notes, every detail meticulously logged, and left the office, her mind racing. That night, she staked out her father's house from a distance, unable to stay away. The FBI raid was swift, agents moving like shadows as they breached the door. Richard didn't resist, his face blank as they cuffed him. Riley watched from her car, her heart a tangle of grief and justice. But the victory felt hollow. The network was still out there, and the threat to Mia was real. Riley drove to the safe house, needing to see her, to know she was okay. Mia greeted her with a fierce hug, her warmth a reminder of why Riley kept fighting. We're close, Riley said, her voice low. But they're desperate. I need you to stay here, just a little longer. Mia nodded, but her eyes held a fire Riley knew too well. I'm not fragile, Riley. Don't treat me like I am. Riley smiled, despite the weight on her shoulders. I know, she said. You're stronger than me. They spent the night talking, planning, holding each other against the storm. Mia's courage fueled Riley, but the fear of losing her was a constant ache. The next day, Torres called with news. Richard was talking, naming names to cut a deal. The network's leader was a man named Ivan Petrov, a shadowy figure with ties to international crime. Petrov was in Ashwood, tying up loose ends before disappearing.
"We've got one shot," Torres said.
Tomorrow night, he's meeting his lieutenants at the old mill. Riley's blood ran hot. This was it, the chance to end the network, to protect Mia, to prove Ashwood couldn't break her. She spent the day preparing, checking her gear, her mind sharp despite the exhaustion. Mia called, her voice steady.
"Come back to me," she said.
"Promise." "I promise," Riley said, her voice breaking. She hung up, her resolve stealing. Petrov was the key, and she'd take him down, no matter the cost. That night, Riley joined the FBI team at the mill, her cover officially blown. She was no longer the drifter. She was Special Agent Voss, badge and all. The mill was a decaying relic, its walls hiding Petrov and his men. Riley moved with the team, her gun drawn, her heart pounding. The raid was chaos, gunfire, shouts, the stench of rust and blood. Riley spotted Petrov, his cold eyes locking on hers as he raised his weapon. She didn't hesitate, firing a clean shot that dropped him. The fight ended as quickly as it began, the network's lieutenants cuffed or dead. But as the dust settled, Riley's phone buzzed. Another text, another photo. Mia, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with fear. The message was simple. You took ours. We take yours. Riley's world stopped. She'd won the battle, but the war had just begun. Riley's hands shook as she stared at the photo of Mia, her heart a war drum in her chest. The mill raid had crippled the network, but someone was still out there, striking back where it hurt most. She showed the text to Torres, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her. They've got Mia. We need to move.
Now.
Torres mobilized the team, tracing the burner phone's signal. It led to a farmhouse on the outskirts of Ashwood, a property tied to one of Petrov's lieutenants. Riley's mind was a storm of fear and focus as they sped through the night, her gun heavy in her holster, her badge a reminder of the power she wielded and its limits. The farmhouse was dark, its windows boarded, but Riley's instincts screamed danger. She led the breach, her training overriding her terror. Inside, the air was thick with dust and despair. They found Mia in the basement, tied to a chair, her face bruised but her eyes fierce. Riley's heart lurched as she cut the ropes, pulling Mia into her arms. "You're okay?" Riley whispered, her voice breaking. Mia nodded, her hands gripping Riley's jacket. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice hoarse but strong. The team swept the house, finding two of Petrov's men hiding in the attic. They surrendered without a fight, their operation shattered by Riley's raid. As the agents cuffed them, Riley held Mia, the world narrowing to the warmth of her breath, the steadiness of her pulse. Back at the field office, Mia gave her statement, her hand never leaving Riley's. The network was done. Petrov dead, Klein and Richard in custody, their lieutenants scattered or arrested. But the victory was bittersweet. Riley's father faced years in prison, his legacy a stain she'd carry forever. That night, they returned to their apartment, the familiar creak of the floorboards a small comfort. Mia curled up against Riley, her head on her chest. "What now?" she asked, her voice soft but searching. Riley stared at the ceiling, the weight of the case lifting but leaving scars behind. "We live," she said. "We love. We keep fighting." She thought of Ashwood, of the prejudice that had sparked this all, the cops who'd stopped her for a hoodie, for loving Mia. The town hadn't changed, but she had. The next morning, Riley and Mia walked through Ashwood streets, hand in hand, unafraid. Neighbors stared, some with judgment, others with quiet respect. Riley didn't care. She'd faced down a trafficking ring, her own father, her deepest fears. She'd won, not just for herself, but for the women she'd saved, for the love she refused to hide. At the diner where they'd met, they sat in their old booth, coffee steaming between them. Mia smiled, her fingers tracing Riley's. "You're my hero," she said, her eyes bright. Riley laughed, a rare, unguarded sound. "You're mine," she said. And in that moment, with the world outside still turning, still judging, they were enough. The case had broken open Ashwood's secrets, forcing the town to confront its shadows. Riley's work wasn't done. She'd keep fighting, keep protecting. But now, she had Mia, their love a beacon in the dark. And no cop, no badge, no hate could take that away.